The sea had a way of keeping secrets. It buried them beneath waves, locked them inside rusted shipwrecks, carried them away with every changing tide. And if someone disappeared along the coast of Blackwater Harbor, the ocean rarely gave them back. The old fisherman believed that. The police had learned to accept it. But every Sunday morning, just before sunrise, one man challenged that truth. He arrived at Harbor Pier 7 at exactly 6 o'clock. Never 6:01. Never 5:59. A black sedan would stop beside the weathered dock. The driver would open the rear door. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stepped out without saying a word. His polished shoes clicked softly against the damp wooden planks as gulls circled overhead. He carried no flowers, no luggage, no phone in his hand, only a silver pocket watch that he opened once every few minutes before slipping it back into his coat. Then he waited. Sometimes the harbor was wrapped in thick fog. Sometimes icy rain soaked his coat until it clung to his shoulders. Sometimes fierce winter winds rattled the fishing boats hard enough to send everyone else indoors. He never left. At precisely 7 o'clock, if no boat appeared on the horizon, he quietly returned to his car. No frustration, no anger, no visible disappointment. The routine repeated the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that, for nearly 7 years. In a town as small as Blackwater Harbor, people noticed everything, especially when it involved Leon Romano. Even those who had never seen his face knew his name. Parents lowered their voices whenever they spoke it. Shopkeepers stopped conversations when one of his black cars rolled through town. The local newspapers never mentioned him directly, yet everyone understood who quietly owned half the waterfront businesses. Officially, Leon Romano was a successful shipping investor. Unofficially, he controlled routes that customs officers somehow never inspected, cargo containers that were never delayed, deals that no competitor dared interrupt. People called him a businessman in public. Behind closed doors, they called him something else, the Mafia Boss. Yet despite the fear surrounding him, there was one thing that confused everyone. Every Sunday, he stood alone on that empty pier, waiting, always waiting. Old Captain Harris had watched him longer than anyone. The retired fisherman often sat outside the bait shop with a cup of bitter coffee, pretending to repair old nets while secretly counting Leon's visits. One cold October morning, a tourist asked him the question everyone else avoided. "Who's he waiting for?" Captain Harris stared across the harbor for several silent seconds. Then he answered quietly, "A woman." The tourist frowned. His wife? No. His daughter? The old man slowly shook his head. Someone who never came back. The tourist laughed awkwardly. "You mean she left him?" Captain Harris looked directly into his eyes. "No, she disappeared." The laughter vanished. The old fisherman took another sip of coffee before continuing. Storm came in faster than anyone expected. One boat never returned. They searched for nearly 2 weeks. They found pieces of wood. They found a life jacket. But they never found her. He glanced toward Leon, who hadn't moved for almost an hour. "They say everyone eventually accepts death." Captain Harris sighed. He never did. Only a few miles away, another story was quietly beginning. Dr. Olivia Stone loved the ocean for reasons completely different from everyone else. While most people admired its beauty, Olivia respected its memory. She believed the sea remembered everything, every migration, every coral reef, every shipwreck, every life it had ever touched. At 32 years old, she had become one of the youngest marine biologists, leading a long-term coastal ecosystem survey for the Atlantic Marine Research Institute. Her work wasn't glamorous. Most days were spent collecting water samples, tagging sea turtles, mapping kelp forests, and documenting changes in marine biodiversity. She preferred it that way. The ocean never lied. Numbers didn't betray people. Currents followed physics, not emotion. After losing both parents in a highway accident when she was 16, Olivia had built her life around things that could be measured. Science, evidence, patterns, things that made sense. Superstition had no place in her world. Ghost stories belonged to fishermen. Legends belonged to tourists. Facts belonged to her, which was exactly why she agreed to survey the abandoned Ashcroft Lighthouse without the slightest hesitation. The lighthouse stood alone on a rocky island nearly 2 miles from Blackwater Harbor. It had been decommissioned decades earlier after modern navigation systems replaced its aging beacon. Since then, storms had slowly reclaimed the building. Windows shattered, wood rotted, salt covered every exposed surface. Local residents avoided it, not because it was dangerous, because they believed it was cursed. According to town legend, strange lights sometimes appeared inside the empty tower during heavy fog. Voices echoed across the water on calm nights, and every few years, someone claimed to have seen a woman standing at the top balcony, staring toward Harbor Pier 7. Olivia dismissed every story with a polite smile. There were logical explanations for everything. Atmospheric reflections, wind passing through broken stone corridors, human imagination filling empty spaces, nothing more. On a gray Monday morning, carrying waterproof equipment and a notebook, Olivia boarded a small research vessel bound for the forgotten island. As the mainland slowly disappeared behind drifting mist, she looked toward the distant shoreline. For just a brief moment, she noticed a solitary figure still standing on Harbor Pier 7. Tall, motionless, wearing a dark overcoat, despite the cold sea wind. The captain noticed where she was looking. That's Leon Romano. Olivia turned. The shipping executive? The captain let out a dry laugh. That's one way to describe him. She raised an eyebrow. He comes here every Sunday. Waiting? The captain nodded. For someone who isn't coming back. Olivia looked again. By then, the black sedan had already driven away. Only the empty pier remained. She didn't know it yet, but before the week was over, she would discover something hidden inside an abandoned lighthouse. Something that should never have existed. A weathered logbook filled with entries written decades earlier. Entries that somehow had been waiting for her. The Ashcroft Lighthouse had been abandoned for 38 years. At least, that was what every official record claimed. As Olivia stepped onto the rocky island, she immediately understood why no one volunteered to come here anymore. The stone pathway leading to the lighthouse had nearly disappeared beneath thick moss and wild coastal grass. Rusted railings leaned dangerously toward the crashing waves below. The sea wind carried the sharp scent of salt, damp wood, and something much older, the unmistakable smell of time itself. Behind her, the research boat's captain secured the ropes before calling out, "I'll be back before sunset." Olivia nodded. "If I'm not finished, I'll wait." He hesitated. "But don't stay after dark." She smiled politely. "I don't believe in ghost stories." The old captain forced a weak grin. Neither did the last caretaker. Before Olivia could ask what he meant, the boat pulled away from the dock. Within minutes, she was completely alone. The lighthouse tower stood nearly 80 feet above the sea. Its once white exterior had faded into cracked gray stone, stained by decades of storms. Broken windows stared toward the ocean like empty eyes. Every gust of wind produced a low whistle through the fractured walls. It almost sounded like someone quietly breathing. Olivia ignored the thought. She unpacked her equipment and began documenting erosion around the foundation. Photographs, laser measurements, moisture readings. Everything proceeded exactly as expected. Science, evidence, facts, just the way she liked it. Nearly 3 hours later, she entered the lighthouse itself. The heavy wooden door groaned loudly as she pushed it open. Dust danced through thin beams of sunlight. Old furniture remained exactly where it had been, left decades earlier. A cracked wooden chair, an iron stove covered in rust, maps hanging crooked on the walls. Even an enamel coffee cup still rested on a narrow table beside the window. It looked as though someone had simply walked outside and forgotten to come back. Olivia photographed everything for the historical preservation report. Nothing unusual, nothing mysterious, until she reached the spiral staircase. Each step creaked beneath her boots as she climbed toward the lantern room. Halfway up, she stopped. Something caught her attention. A section of the wall looked newer than the surrounding stone. Not new, just less damaged, as if someone had repaired it years after the lighthouse had supposedly been abandoned. Curious, she brushed away layers of dust. A faint wooden outline emerged beneath loose plaster. A hidden compartment. That's strange. Using the flat edge of her measuring tool, she carefully pried the panel open. Inside sat a small metal box. Its surface was covered in rust, but the lock had long since corroded away. Olivia lifted the lid. Inside were only 3 objects: an old brass key, a faded black and white photograph, and a leather-bound journal. She picked up the photograph first. The image showed the lighthouse shortly after it had been built. A lighthouse keeper stood proudly beside the entrance with his family, his wife, a young daughter, and another little girl standing slightly apart from them. Someone had scratched a circle around the second child using a knife. No name, no explanation, just a circle. Olivia frowned. Then she opened the journal. The leather cracked softly beneath her fingers. The first page read, "Ashcroft Lighthouse Keeper's Log, the 3rd of January 1978. The handwriting was elegant, steady, meticulous, exactly what she would expect from someone responsible for recording weather conditions every day. The first entries seemed completely ordinary. Wind direction, wave height, fog density, passing ships, maintenance reports. She skimmed through dozens of pages. Nothing unusual, until one sentence stopped her. March 14. No ships today. The gull with the broken wing returned. It landed on the eastern railing at exactly 3:17 inches the afternoon. Olivia blinked. At that exact moment, She heard wings outside. Curious, she walked onto the balcony. A single seagull landed on the eastern railing. Its left wing dragged awkwardly behind it. She instinctively checked her watch. Uch. Onye de peme. A chill crawled slowly down her spine. Coincidence? Nothing more. The journal was nearly 50 years old. Thousands of injured birds probably visited this lighthouse over the decades. She closed the book with a quiet laugh. You're letting the atmosphere get to you. Returning inside, she continued cataloging the room. An hour later, she discovered another entry. April 2. Heavy rain before sunset. The power generator in the storage room will fail. Olivia frowned. Will fail? Not failed. Will. The wording was strange. She looked toward the dusty generator in the corner. It hadn't worked in decades. There was no electricity connected to the lighthouse anymore. Impossible. Just as she dismissed the thought, a loud metallic crash echoed from downstairs. Startled, she hurried toward the lower level. The portable generator she had brought with her for survey equipment had suddenly stopped running. Smoke drifted from the engine compartment. She crouched beside it. A broken fuel line, exactly as described. Olivia slowly stood. Her heartbeat quickened. She looked back toward the staircase, toward the journal waiting upstairs. No, there had to be an explanation. Perhaps someone had written inside the old logbook much later. Maybe the pages weren't actually from 1978. Maybe someone had played an elaborate prank. Back in the lantern room, she examined the journal more carefully. The ink had faded naturally. The paper had yellowed evenly. Even the stitching matched publishing techniques used decades earlier. Nothing suggested forgery. She turned another page, then another. The entries slowly changed. Weather reports became shorter. Observations became stranger. Mai onsekis. The sea remembers names. June 1. Some futures refuse to stay unwritten. June 19. Time doesn't always move forward at Ashcroft Lighthouse. Olivia stared at the words. Her scientific training urged her to dismiss them immediately. Yet, she couldn't stop reading. The final third of the journal contained no dates at all, only names, dozens of them, each followed by short descriptions. Some had a single sentence, some only one word. Missing, returned, safe, drowned, forgiven. She flipped through the pages faster. Then suddenly, her own name appeared. Olivia Stone. Every muscle in her body froze. Her hands trembled so violently that the journal nearly slipped from her fingers. This wasn't possible. She had never visited Ashcroft Lighthouse before today. No one living here should have known her name. Slowly, almost afraid to breathe, she continued reading. Olivia Stone, marine biologist. She will arrive alone. She will not believe the first warning. She will open the hidden compartment. She will doubt every word until the harbor chooses for her. Olivia's mouth went dry. The room suddenly felt much colder. She looked toward the hidden compartment, toward the open metal box, toward the exact place where she had found the journal less than an hour earlier. Every sentence had already happened. Then she realized something even more terrifying. There were still several unread pages remaining, and whatever came next hadn't happened yet. Olivia stared at the remaining pages for nearly a full minute. She wanted to close the journal. She wanted to lock it back inside the metal box. She wanted to convince herself that someone had orchestrated an elaborate hoax. Instead, she turned the next page. The handwriting hadn't changed. Still neat, still deliberate, still unsettlingly calm. She will keep reading, even after promising herself she won't. A nervous laugh escaped her lips. No. She immediately shut the journal. There, she whispered the word aloud, as if saying it made the decision real. I'm done. She slipped the leather-bound book into her backpack, zipped it closed, and stood. The lighthouse suddenly felt far too small, too quiet. The silence pressed against her ears. Outside, the wind had begun to rise, sending waves crashing violently against the rocks below. Olivia descended the spiral staircase, 2 steps at a time. She would finish documenting the building, return to the mainland, and hand the journal to the local historical society. Someone else could explain it. Someone else could deal with it. As she reached the ground floor, her satellite phone vibrated. The screen displayed the name of her research assistant, Emma Hughes. Olivia answered immediately. Emma, you've been trying to reach me? Emma sounded confused. No, you called me. Olivia frowned. What? My phone rang 5 minutes ago. It showed your number. When I answered, Emma hesitated. There was only static. I never called. You did. I'm looking at the log right now. Olivia checked her own phone. There were no outgoing calls. Not one. The signal indicator flickered strangely before disappearing altogether. No reception. Emma's voice suddenly broke apart beneath heavy interference. Olivia, leave. Don't. The line went dead. Silence. She slowly lowered the phone. Another coincidence. Another perfectly reasonable explanation. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. Outside, the afternoon sky had darkened unexpectedly. A wall of gray clouds rolled across the ocean, far faster than the weather forecast had predicted. The captain hadn't mentioned a storm. Olivia hurried toward the dock. The research boat was already approaching the island. She waved. The captain waved back. Just as the boat reached the pier, its engine coughed. Once, twice, then stopped completely. The vessel drifted sideways as waves pushed it against the rocks. Damn it. The captain leaned over the engine compartment. It won't restart. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Without thinking, she opened the journal again. Her eyes searched the next page. There it was. The boat will fail before reaching shore. She will remain on the island one more night. She slammed the journal shut. No, this isn't happening. The captain finally managed to throw a rope onto the dock. I'm sorry, he shouted over the wind. I can't risk bringing her in. The tide's turning. I'll send another boat first thing tomorrow morning. Before Olivia could protest, another powerful wave pushed the vessel backward. Within seconds, the boat disappeared into the growing mist. She was stranded, exactly as the journal had predicted. Night arrived quickly. Rain hammered the lighthouse windows. Thunder rolled endlessly across the sea. Olivia lit an old oil lantern she had discovered in one of the storage rooms. Its warm glow barely reached the corners of the building. She tried reading scientific papers on her tablet. She couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the backpack, toward the journal. Finally, just after 10 o'clock, she gave in. The next pages no longer described weather or equipment failures. They described people, specific people, One name appeared repeatedly: Leon Romano. She had heard it only once before, from the boat captain that morning. The journal described him differently than the town did. Not as a criminal, not as a businessman, simply as the man who waits. She continued reading. Every Sunday, he stands at Harbor Pier 7, not because he believes she is alive, because he cannot bear the day he stopped believing. Olivia frowned. The wording carried an unmistakable sadness. Nothing about power, nothing about violence, only grief. Another page. Many fear Leon Romano. Few understand him. None know why he waits. The following page contained only a single sentence. Soon, she will. A sudden knock echoed through the lighthouse. 3 slow knocks. Olivia froze. She looked toward the entrance. Another knock, then another. Impossible. No boats had come. No lights were visible outside. The island was completely isolated. Holding the lantern tightly, she approached the heavy wooden door. Hello? No answer. Only rain. She unlocked the door and slowly pulled it open. No one stood outside. The rocky path was empty. The wind howled across the cliffs. She stepped onto the porch and raised the lantern higher. Nothing, just darkness. Then she noticed something lying on the wet stone directly in front of the door. A single white lily, fresh. Its petals were untouched by the rain. Olivia picked it up. The stem had been cut only hours earlier. Someone had placed it there. Someone who couldn't possibly have reached the island. Her pulse quickened. She hurried back inside, locked the door, and leaned against it. Only then did she notice something tucked beneath the flower. A folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. There were only 7 handwritten words. He still waits every Sunday. No signature, no date, no explanation. Her breathing became shallow. She rushed back to the journal, frantically turning pages until she reached the next unread entry. The ink seemed darker than before, almost fresh, as though it had been written moments earlier. It read, "When she finds the lily, she will finally ask the question she has been avoiding. Who was the woman Leon Romano waited for?" Olivia whispered the words before she even realized she was reading them aloud. Who was she? The lantern flame flickered violently. A cold draft swept through the room. The journal lay open on the table, and before Olivia's horrified eyes, a new line slowly appeared beneath the old ink, as if an invisible hand were writing it in real time. Turn the next page. For the first time in her life, Dr. Olivia Stone was no longer certain that everything in the world could be explained by science. With trembling fingers, she reached for the page and turned it. The page was blank, completely blank. Olivia blinked. She slowly turned it over. Nothing, only yellowed paper, worn smooth by time. For several long seconds, she simply stared. Then, tiny black dots began to appear, one after another, like droplets of ink soaking upward through the fibers instead of sinking into them. The letters formed slowly, deliberately, as though an unseen hand refused to be rushed. Olivia couldn't look away. The sentence finished itself. Some stories cannot be read. They must be remembered. The lantern flickered again. A violent gust slammed against the lighthouse windows. Without warning, the room disappeared. Olivia found herself standing in the exact same lantern room. But everything had changed. The dust was gone. The cracked windows were whole. The brass mechanisms gleamed as though they had been polished that morning. The beacon above her rotated with a slow, rhythmic hum, casting brilliant light across the restless sea. She spun around. What? Her own voice sounded distant, muted, like it belonged to someone underwater. Footsteps echoed from below, heavy boots climbing the spiral staircase. Instinctively, Olivia stepped backward. An elderly man emerged into the lantern room, carrying a steaming enamel mug. He wore the dark blue uniform of a lighthouse keeper. His gray beard was neatly trimmed. His shoulders were broad, despite his age. He walked straight toward the large windows, passing directly through Olivia. She gasped. The mug never spilled. The old man never reacted. He couldn't see her. She wasn't there. Or rather, she wasn't there anymore. She was watching. Not dreaming. Not imagining. Watching. The keeper sighed as he looked toward the harbor. Storms coming. Another voice answered from downstairs. A little girl's voice. I'm almost finished. Seconds later, a child, no older than 10, bounded into the room. Dark curls, bright blue eyes, bare feet despite the cold stone floor. She laughed as she wrapped her arms around the keeper's waist. Dad, look. She held up a sketchbook filled with drawings of boats. The old man smiled warmly. The Romano freighter? She nodded proudly. I made it bigger. He chuckled. Everything you draw is bigger. Their laughter filled the room. Olivia watched in silence. This wasn't just a memory. It felt alive. Every movement, every expression, every tiny detail. A family, happy, whole. Another figure climbed the stairs. A woman carrying fresh bread, wrapped in linen. She kissed the keeper gently before placing the basket on the table. Supper. The little girl immediately reached for a loaf. Her mother laughed, hands first. The child groaned dramatically. I already washed them. You splashed water on them. I did not. You absolutely did. The keeper smiled, without turning around. Listen to your mother. For a brief moment, the lighthouse felt impossibly warm. Then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. The entire family became silent. The keeper exchanged a glance with his wife. I'll get it. He disappeared downstairs. Olivia followed. Although her feet never touched the wooden steps, she descended effortlessly. The front door opened. Standing outside was a young man in a soaked black coat, no older than 28. Rain streamed from his dark hair. His expression remained calm, controlled, yet his eyes carried a sadness Olivia had never seen before. She recognized him instantly. Leon Romano, only much younger, far younger than the man she had seen standing at Harbor Pier 7. The lighthouse keeper smiled. Leon, you made it. I almost didn't. Leon removed his cap respectfully. The storm's moving faster than expected. I know. The keeper looked toward the sea. You should stay the night. Leon hesitated. I promised someone I'd return before midnight. The keeper laughed softly. You'll have many midnights. The sea doesn't always give second chances. For just an instant, something unreadable crossed Leon's face. Almost regret. Almost fear. Before he could answer, the little girl ran into the hallway. Leon. She threw her arms around him. His serious expression disappeared completely. He knelt and hugged her tightly. There you are. You promised you'd teach me how to tie sailor knots. I remember. You forgot. I was only late. Late is forgetting. Leon smiled. I stand corrected. Olivia frowned. She had expected intimidation, power, the cold confidence of a mafia boss. Instead, she saw kindness, patience, affection. The little girl reached into Leon's coat pocket without asking. You brought chocolate. I always bring chocolate. You spoil her. The keeper's wife shook her head, smiling. Leon shrugged. I've been accused of worse. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Olivia. Because something wasn't right. The journal, the warning, the harbor, the missing woman. She searched every face. Which one? Which one never came back? The vision shifted. Without warning, the cheerful afternoon dissolved into darkness. Rain pounded the windows. The lighthouse bell rang wildly. The family was gone. Only Leon remained. He stood at the harbor below, shouting into the storm. No. His voice cracked. Turn back. Far beyond the crashing waves, a small white boat fought desperately against towering swells. Lightning split the sky. For one terrifying second, Olivia saw a woman standing at the bow, long dark hair whipped by the wind, one hand gripping the railing, the other raised toward the lighthouse, toward Leon. She was smiling, not frightened, not screaming, simply smiling. Another flash of lightning. The boat vanished behind a monstrous wall of water. Leon ran. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the end of the pier. People grabbed him, held him back. He fought like a man possessed. Let me go. She's still out there. Another wave exploded against the rocks. The little white boat never reappeared. The storm swallowed everything. Silence followed. A silence so complete. It was unbearable. Leon remained on his knees at the end of the dock. Rain streamed down his face. Whether they were tears or seawater, no one could tell. The world around Olivia blurred once more. The lighthouse, the storm, the harbor, everything dissolved into darkness. Then, the journal's voice whispered from somewhere beyond the shadows. You have seen how she disappeared. You still do not know why. Olivia opened her eyes. She was back inside the abandoned lighthouse. The lantern burned quietly beside her. The journal lay open on the table, exactly where she had left it. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably. One thing was certain now. Leon Romano had not spent 7 years waiting because he refused to move on. He waited because he believed something impossible, because somewhere deep inside him, he believed the sea had taken her, but it had never truly claimed her. As Olivia lowered her eyes to the bottom of the page, fresh ink began spreading across the paper once again. Only one sentence appeared. The next memory belongs to her. Olivia stared at the final sentence until the fresh ink stopped moving. The next memory belongs to her. The page turned on its own. Darkness swallowed the lantern room once again. But this time, she wasn't watching from the outside. She was seeing through someone else's eyes. The wind tasted of salt. The deck beneath her feet rose and fell violently with the waves. A young woman tightened her grip on the railing as rain soaked her navy coat. Her name came to Olivia before anyone spoke it. Isabella. She was the woman. The one Leon had waited for. The one the town believed had drowned. Behind her, an elderly captain shouted over the storm, "We have to turn back." Isabella looked toward the distant lighthouse, toward the faint beam cutting through the rain. "No, if I don't deliver this, more people will die." She pulled a waterproof leather satchel closer to her chest. Inside were documents, shipping manifests, account books, names, dates, route, evidence, not against Leon Romano, but against the men who wanted his empire. Years earlier, Leon had discovered that several trusted partners were secretly using his shipping company to traffic weapons and children through his ports. He had begun gathering proof to hand over to federal authorities in exchange for dismantling the organization from within. Only 3 people knew the truth: Leon, the lighthouse keeper, and Isabella. She had volunteered to carry the evidence across the harbor before dawn, believing no one would suspect a young marine cartographer traveling alone. But someone had betrayed them. The storm hadn't been an accident. Neither had the boat. As another wave crashed across the deck, 2 armed men emerged from the cabin. Olivia felt Isabella's heartbeat quicken. One of the men smiled. "There isn't any Coast Guard coming." There never was. The captain tried to intervene. A gunshot echoed across the water. He collapsed instantly. The engine was deliberately damaged. The boat drifted helplessly toward the open sea. The men reached for the satchel. Isabella clutched it tightly. "You'll never find it." One of them laughed. "We don't need to. You won't survive long enough to tell anyone." They pushed her overboard. The freezing ocean swallowed her whole. Olivia expected darkness, death, the end. Instead, she saw Isabella fighting upward through the waves. She surfaced only once, just once, long enough to see Leon running onto the pier. She lifted one hand. She smiled, not because she was unafraid, because she wanted him to remember her smiling. Then, another wave carried her away, but she did not drown. The current dragged her beneath a narrow sea cave hidden beneath the cliffs beyond the lighthouse. Bruised, barely conscious, alive. For days she waited, unable to climb out because of the tides. When fishermen finally discovered the cave, they weren't fishermen at all. They belonged to the same criminal network hunting the documents. They captured Isabella before she could return, to protect Leon and to protect everyone named inside the satchel. She allowed the world to believe she had died. She disappeared, not beneath the sea, but behind a new identity. The documents were hidden inside the lighthouse, inside the very compartment where Olivia had found the journal decades later. The journal had never predicted the future. It had preserved the truth. The lighthouse keeper had written everything he witnessed, everything Leon told him, everything Isabella secretly recorded after escaping. The final blank pages had been left unfinished because the story itself had not yet ended. Only one person remained capable of finishing it. Someone who would arrive years later. Someone whose life had always been destined to cross theirs. Olivia Stone. The vision dissolved. She was back inside the abandoned lighthouse. Morning sunlight spilled through the broken windows. The storm had passed. The journal lay open before her. Its final page was empty. For the first time, it waited for her. Beside it rested the brass key she had found inside the metal box. She looked around the room until her eyes settled on the old wooden desk beneath the window. There was a tiny keyhole hidden beneath years of peeling paint. The brass key fit perfectly. A hidden drawer slid open. Inside was the waterproof satchel, still sealed, still intact, exactly where Isabella had hidden it. Alongside the documents was a single, unopened envelope. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably feminine. For Leon. Olivia hesitated. Then she carefully unfolded the letter. Leon, if you're reading this, then someone kinder than fate has finally found the truth. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I disappeared because loving you meant protecting you. Every Sunday, you waited for me. I knew you would. I prayed that one day someone would come after me, not to rescue me, but to rescue the truth. If that day has finally arrived, please stop waiting. The years you gave me were enough. Live the rest for yourself. Isabella. Tears blurred Olivia's vision. She carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. 3 days later, the entire harbor watched in silence. Leon Romano stood on Harbor Pier 7, as he always had. 6 o'clock, the same overcoat, the same silver pocket watch, the same horizon. But this Sunday, someone walked toward him. Olivia. She said nothing at first. She simply held out the weathered envelope. Leon looked at the handwriting. His hands began to shake. For a man feared by everyone, he suddenly looked heartbreakingly human. He opened the letter slowly. He read every word. Then he closed his eyes. No tears fell. He had cried enough for 7 lifetimes. When he finally looked back at the sea, the sun was rising over Blackwater Harbor. For the first time in 7 years, he closed the pocket watch before 7 o'clock. He slipped it into his coat, turned away from the harbor, and walked home. Olivia remained alone on the pier, listening to the waves. She finally understood something the ocean had been trying to teach her all along. The sea does keep secrets, but not forever. Sometimes it simply waits for the right person to carry them safely back to shore. Weeks later, after the authorities exposed the criminal network using the evidence from the satchel, Ashcroft Lighthouse reopened as a maritime museum. Visitors often asked about the old leather journal displayed in a glass case. They always noticed the last page. It contained just one handwritten sentence, not written by the lighthouse keeper, not by Isabella, not by Leon, but by Olivia Stone. Some people wait for miracles. Others become the reason those miracles finally come home.